Gents, I just want to pause the episode for a moment to let you know about the Strong Men of Value Academy. You will have heard me refer to it a number of times, and I want to bring more attention to it. So this isn't just a program, it's a life-changing environment and community of men who are focused on personal and professional growth. We're looking at areas of relationships, wealth, and health, things to help you thrive and maximize your life. Imagine having bi-monthly one-on-one coaching sessions with myself, weekly group coaching calls, and an incredible brotherhood of high achievers by your side. Now we're diving into resilience, leadership, and holistic growth to not just succeed in your career, but to thrive in your health and your relationships. Your journey to greatness, it starts here. So join the movement and you can apply for the Strong Men of Value Academy. You can head to themanthatcanproject.com to find out more. In this conversation, we will be discussing finding your self-worth, what it takes to be an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship in general, how to rebuild your confidence from hitting rock bottom, and so much more around how to feel like a success, the difference between being a success to other people, but actually feeling like a success within yourself. So you'll take away so much from this conversation with Michael Bauman from Success Engineering, and it's going to be an absolute belter. Gents, today, our new intake of the men who have joined the Strong Men of Value kickoff. We've got our launch call tonight, which I'm very, very excited about, and to work with these men over the next 12 weeks and beyond and see them take their whole lives to a new level. So if you're following along in the podcast, I'll probably, interview a few of them over the coming weeks, but also stay tuned on the socials, because for those who, just didn't get into action in time to apply, or you were still sitting on the fence, this will be the 12 weeks that you really want to keep an eye in to see how many blokes really fucking crush their goals. Not only will they crush their goals, they're going to be a part of an incredible community of blokes who support them with their endeavors, but are also there to bounce ideas off to help them become better dads, better employees, better business owners, and everything in their life. So it's going to be exciting, but especially for those career-driven men who want to improve other aspects of their life, because, majority of blokes here are very focused on their career, and also for those who have businesses, and to the point where they may neglect and run down other areas of their life. So we're here to hold you accountable. So if you're looking to get involved in the next intake, that will be April, but you will be able to apply in a couple of weeks' time to go on the wait list. But in the meantime, you can check out some other things if you head over to the website, themanthatcanproject.com, or just jump into our free Facebook group, The Man That Can Project. That's enough from me. Remember, leave a review, leave a rating. I truly appreciate it, because it helps other men out there, and it helps iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, all of those platforms go, hey, this podcast, this episode is actually providing value for a heap of people out there. Let's show it to more people. So thank you. Let's dive into the episode. Welcome to the Man That Can Project podcast, a podcast empowering men to take ownership for their lives through higher performance. I'm your host, Stuart, and join me for weekly conversations around fitness, mental health, spirituality, relationships, finances, communication, and more. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and please leave a 5-star rating and review. Doing this helps the show to grow and get in the hands of men who really need it. Let's get into today's show. Today, I'm very fortunate, privileged to have Michael Bauman joining us from China today, which is going to be an incredible interview. My first guest from China, Mike. So it's going to be an incredible one. But for those tuning in, Michael is a certified Tony Robbins coach, and he specializes in helping entrepreneurs and leaders feel like they're enough, which is, I think, is a very powerful and important thing as an entrepreneur myself. I consider myself an entrepreneur, but I think a lot of what we're going to talk about, and I know the incredible conversation and points that will come up, are really things that you can implement into various other areas of your life. So as you're listening to this, gents, if you're not an entrepreneur, it's not a reason to turn it off. You're just going to be able to put this into the context of your own life, because I believe entrepreneurship is something that everyone should give a crack, especially in today's day and age with technology and the ability to work from home and do side hustles, because a lot of what you can learn around challenging becoming aware, of your own strengths and weaknesses, dealing with failure, dealing with making mistakes, which we all do, rejection, various other things like that can really force us to grow when something on the other side, like a business, can fall apart if you don't deal with it. So there's a bit of a opportunity cost there. But Mike, great to have you on the show, brother. And thank you so much for making the time. How's everything going for you?
Absolutely. It's good. Yeah. I mean, just like the rest of the world, we have the COVID stuff that's going on, but we're working through it. So
It sounds, from what we were chatting about offline, it sounds very interesting with how you guys are handling it over there. It sounds like a cool way because you guys aren't really experiencing it. Obviously, there's no travel happening, but the way you've contained it's been very, very cool from the sounds of it.
yeah, they've definitely, I mean, when you have a top-down implementation, you can just, there's pros and cons to it, but it has definitely helped with the spread when there's quarantines, that are rigidly like adhered to and very strict things around masks and temperature checking and things like that. So it hasn't really been an issue, except for recently, there's some things, but it's very well controlled for the most part.
Yeah, that's awesome. And your company and your podcast, Success Engineering, obviously doing extremely well, and how you have managed to achieve that. I'd love to go back a little bit with how you got into specializing or really focusing on helping entrepreneurs feel like they're enough. Sorry, was there a point in your life where you went through not feeling like you were enough, or you experienced loneliness and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Lots of periods of time, and it's still a challenge. It's still a struggle. It's not something that just goes away. It's something we always have to work on. So, taking it back, I was a personal trainer, a nutrition coach, assistant department head of my gym facility, and I kind of hit a glass ceiling on that. And I'm like, I'm going to branch out. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to become an entrepreneur. Like, it's going to be amazing, right? We have these dreams. I was like, I'm just going to be crushing it in like a year and like, making all this money and having all this time and whatever. Right. So I had sold books two summers, door to door. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to leave my job. I'm just going to literally just go door to door to get kind of my base client things to grow this. And then we'll be off the races. So quit my job, and then I'm going door to door, and of course, like, my best laid plans do not end up like that. I totally failed at this initial spurt into entrepreneurship. Like, I didn't get any clients. We found out my wife was pregnant basically 2 weeks after I decided to quit my job. So she's pregnant. She has morning sickness. It's just like throwing up back at home. Like, wants me there at home. I feel like such a failure because we have like absolutely no money. We had to go on to like food stamps. Essentially, I mean, it was the darkest time. Like, my wife was struggling with depression. I felt totally worthless, totally alone. Like, there's a couple aspects of loneliness with entrepreneurs. One is like, you do this entrepreneur thing and nobody around you understands why the heck you're doing it. Like, they're just like, just get a job. Like, well, like, why are you doing that? So You can feel completely alone in that regard. And so I just was, I mean, it broke me down to just kind of the bottom. I deconstructed a lot of the things that I believed and changed a lot about who I was, and had to work through that process. And through it, we decided to, move to China. My wife's an art teacher. And we're like, well, everything sucks here. Maybe we'll just try something else. But through that process, I was able to start, developing what I'm doing with Success Engineering, working with entrepreneurs. So that's kind of the brief story around that.
It's very powerful. Like, did you find it all during that period where, the finding out that your wife was pregnant, and you just had a child, and you're experiencing and going on to food stamps, was there a moment in time where you really had to, or you really questioned yourself and had to swallow your pride? Because obviously, with the company being called Success Engineering, and you're an entrepreneur yourself, and you're also having conversations and empowering entrepreneurs and helping them be better. Was it really hard when you were going on the food stamps and dealing with all those things in the background, or did it ever dent your belief in self during that period? And what sort of empowered you to keep going? Because for a lot of people, dealing with those individually, let alone probably a number of them at once, is enough to make enough people go, nah, I'm done. I'll just go back to a nice cozy job where I might not be as happy, but I'm safe. But for you, you just continued to roll with the punches. Why? Like, how did you manage to do that?
Yeah, so it's a little different. It wasn't actually Success Engineering at that time. It was under a different name. And so I did basically, like, as an entrepreneur, I mean, you have to market with your time or your money. And so I was marketing with my time. I didn't have like any money, so I couldn't do that. And then eventually I was like, I need to actually just get money to pay any type of bills for my family. So I start doing these like odd jobs, and I start doing some landscaping and, different things like that's just to fill in the gaps. And so at that point, basically, like I shut down what I was doing with that business. And I would describe it as like, you were talking about self-worth, like a lot of my life leading up until that point, I'd been really, quote unquote, successful with, done well in school, played sports and, just different things like that. Like, had a lot of confidence in myself, a lot of belief that, if I set my mind to something, like I can go out and do it. And that really shattered a lot of that for me. I went in, like, I would describe it as the world turned gray for a number of years. Like I just went to the random jobs that I was doing. I lost my passion. I lost pretty much everything. And it was kind of a long process. It didn't change overnight. One of the things, and I know this is important for, what you do, is I just had people that believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, which I believe in myself quite a lot. Like it's kind of one of my biggest fears, is actually to be at a point where I'm so weak that, somebody else has to come in. It's one of my biggest fears. So I avoid that at all costs. Like I try to put all these systems in place that are, getting me where I need to go and accomplishing my goals. And that was a period where like I lost all of that. And so we had incredible friends that just supported us monetarily. They supported us like with their just being there for us during those period of times that we wouldn't have gotten through it without that time. I feel like that is so important to have those friends and to develop those relationships before you need them as well, because I honestly don't know what would have happened if I didn't have that.
I love where you just said before you need them. It's like a bank account relationships, and whether they're an intimate relationship or a friendship or a mateship, the more we invest into, there was a basketball or NFL player that recently said, because his quarterback just like lost his shit at the wide receiver or whoever it was, and they're like, "Are you upset with how he treated you on the field?" Is that no? He's like, our relationship's like a bank account, and he's been putting deposits in our relationship for being his wide receiver for 10 years. He just took a withdrawal, so he's still got plenty of points in there up his sleeve. So I'm not angry at him. I understand where it came from, and I think it's really important for all of us to invest our time in our relationships and understand that, hey, just because you've been friends yesterday, you've got to earn the right to keep those friendships. And there are going to come times where you need to lean on them and also be okay with being vulnerable. What I took a lot away from what you were saying there was, for me, it's a lot of us struggle, and a lot of blokes really are challenged with being vulnerable, where we're afraid to ask for help even when we really need it. And sometimes asking for help can be the one thing that completely changes the game for us. Whether it's monetary, whether it's just having someone to have a chat to, can completely give you that step up that you need to get back on your feet and then create some momentum for yourself. Were there moments in that whole experience where your confidence was just at rock bottom and you didn't feel like you could get out?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it was kind of an interesting thing, because even when I was doing, these odd landscaping jobs and stuff like that, it was actually a time where I started to read again. So I was reading, listening to these audiobooks, when I'm like, it's like really smoking hot, outside, and I'm like just dying. So I'm like listening to the audiobooks. And that was really kind of where the seed of what I do now with the success engineering started, because I was like, what actually is success? Like my life is just trash right now, and what life do I want to build out of this like garbage heap that I have right now? So I read Start With Why by Simon Sinek, and there's a part in it where he talks about, he goes to MIT. It's called The Gathering of the Titans, and there's multi-millionaire people, the room is full of them. The speaker asks them, how many of you have achieved your financial goals? And all of them put their hand, like 80% of the room raise their hands. Like most of them don't have to work another day in their life. And he follows it up with, how many of you feel like a success? And 80% of this room put their hands back down. And that story right there was just, I mean, started my pursuit of going like, what actually is success? Like, and it's more so, how can we feel like a success in every area of our life? So how can I actually feel like a successful husband? How can I feel like a successful parent? How can I feel like a success as an entrepreneur, or in relationship to my finances and my wealth, in relationship to my physical body? And through those external, people talk about mentors. So it's kind of that external mentor that you get access to, which is incredible in this world. You get access to the systems and the tools of like the best people in the world.
It's insane.
That I started to put these building blocks together and go like, what would actually make a successful life? And that was another one of those support groups, quote unquote, whether it's books, kind of virtual mentors, so to speak, that helps me actually get through that process and really start constructing something after everything was deconstructed.
A few things that I took away from that, like I really love the fact that when you were dealing with, juggling all those external stresses and I guess the external things that popped up in your life, you would do whatever it took to continue moving forward as an entrepreneur. You were okay to be a landscaper and work in various other roles. And whether, some people might feel like that's a step in the wrong direction and then they just settle, or they feel like I've failed and I can't continue moving forward. Whereas you use that as a vehicle to then allow you to progress forward. And much like myself, I went through, laboring and various other things and utilize that as a tool just to keep me fed, clothed and sheltered. But in hours after that, I was listening to podcasts like yourself, and when, I could have been listening to music or drinking beers, but I was like, I need to invest in myself because that's going to be where the ideas come from around potentially what's next. And you said success engineering was born from you listening to podcasts while you were landscaping. And it was like, just for anyone even listening to this, that you might learn something from Michael that triggers something within yourself that you're like, this could be the next path for where my life's going. And so I think it's really important to make time for these moments, to utilize tools and resources for the betterment of your life. Because if what you're currently doing is not working for you, sometimes, we talk about opportunity cost. If you're not listening to audiobooks in the car, or if you're, not hanging around people like you were saying in the MIT, where you get to redefine what a definition of success is, or talk to people who you view to be successful and they don't feel successful, you get to start questioning things. You get to start challenging your own beliefs and question what you're actually working towards. Because I've met many people, as Michael was talking about, where you feel like that you might idolize them. And then when you get to become mates with them, you realize they're not happy. And everything that you thought would make you happy, you realize now doesn't. So I think it's very important to start questioning your own beliefs. But I'm curious, what is success to you?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And I'll kind of lay out there. I feel like there's different actually layers to it. And I'll, at the end, I'll give you like, my cut and dried kind of definition. But, on the surface, you have the appearance of success. And so, I have a podcast called Success Engineering, and I interview tons of different people from all over. I mean, Broadway directors and multimillionaires, CEOs and stuff. And it's interesting to see the fears, the doubts, the loneliness that is kind of behind success. So we have this appearance and it looks like you're completely successful, but you might actually hate your life and it might feel really lonely. So underneath that, you have the feeling of success. And, I know for you, you have like 8 different areas of life. I classify it into 6, but you have your aspect of relationships and aspect of your finances, your mental, your emotional. Then you have aspects of like spiritual growth. And I think I'm missing someone in there, physical. So then you can go, how can I feel like a success with my body? Right? Because you're asking that question, feeling, which is different than appearing like it. Mm-hmm. So how can I feel like a success? How can I feel like a success with my wealth? How can I feel like a success with, whatever it is, with my growth and my purpose and my spirituality? And then you can actually look at different values, and you can use these values to create really precise questions around this. So the values of like freedom, you can ask like, what would freedom feel like to me in the area of my physical body? Right? For some people, like That's maybe their grandparent, and that's getting up and down off the ground. Like that feels like freedom to them. Somebody else is like, I summited Everest, right?
Yeah.
That feels like freedom for them, right? So it's very individual, but you can use that question. But then same thing with money. Like what would freedom feel like with my money? Like what's the amount that I would actually feel free? And then you ask that question, like, why that amount? And does it really have to be that amount, right? Because we associate certain amounts with, like, if I'm making, 6 figures a year, 7 figures a year, or have, this amount in my retirement. But asking, like, why would you actually want that amount? Like what would feel like freedom, and can you actually get it without having that much money, is an interesting question to ask. So you have aspects of freedom. You also have aspects of beauty and creativity. So you can ask the question of, like, what is beautiful about my body? What is beautiful about money? Like, what is beautiful about my mind? What is beautiful about my emotions? Right? That's an interesting question to ask, because so often we just like hate our emotions and we push them away. But asking, going like, what is beautiful about them? What are they trying to help me with? Is an interesting question. And then you can do it around like areas of like love and passion and joy, some of those values. Like, what do I love about my body? What do I love doing? How can I move in a way that I enjoy? What do I love about my wealth? Like, what brings me, joy with it? Or how can I bring joy for other people? So you can use those questions to get a really good idea of like the feeling of success. And then underneath that, there's actually the identities and the stories that create those feelings. So this is where it gets interesting around like not feeling like enough. It could be an instance that happened when you were a kid and made you like, perform and high achieve, from that point on, because there's a story that you tell around yourself. Like if I'm not doing quote unquote enough, then I'll never be a success. And we have all of these stories, and these stories are different in different situations. They're different when you're interacting with different people. But actually looking at what are the stories that I'm telling around this. So you look at your identities and you can change and deconstruct those. And then underneath that, I feel like there's a level of actually just being fully present in the moment. Like I for me feel like that's the best gift that I can give to myself. It's the best gift I can give to my kids. It's the best gift I can give to my wife and any person that I'm talking to. Like, am I fully present in that moment? And there's a phenomenal quote that I love. Maria Popova, she writes The Brain Pickings, a super fantastic website. But she says, I stopped measuring my days by degree of productivity, and I started experiencing them by degree of presence. And so when I'm looking at the measures for success, that's one, and it varies. Some days I feel like I do that better, and some days I don't. But that's like at a deep level what I would say success is. So if I were to put that all into your like little nutshell quote, like for me, success is like consistent, intentional actions that you have that align with the values and fundamental beliefs that you believe. Then you pair that with a deep presence, a deep awareness, and then that gets compounded over time.
That was brilliant. That was very, very well said the whole time. I'm like, for me, one thing I really took away from that was just the power of questions, like to go into things and really understand where certain things sit for you. Like and the feeling, because we've spoken about in the past, like logic, if everyone could follow logic, we'd all be wealthy, super confident, everything would be just amazing. But unfortunately, it's not, because the emotional and how we feel about things is completely different. And I appreciate your honesty there, where there's some days it feels like you're being extremely present, and then there's other days where you're not quite as present. And that's a realistic benchmark. Not every day you're going to feel like you're nailing it. Not every day you're going to feel amazing in your body. You're going to feel like a success. And that's why what you talk about is it's so important to understand that this is we're all a work in progress. And if we neglect certain things, they're going to retract. Like, we're not going to feel as good about them. So we must continue to check in with them, be aware of how we're feeling in certain areas, and also prioritize some time to those areas, whether it's the self-care around your body and how you feel about it, how you feel in it. And also starting to learn to be aware around what foods make you feel good, or what kind of exercise makes you feel good, or what people make you feel good. And generally probably do more of those things and minimize the things that don't make you feel as good. That's a good place to start. But because we live in such a fast-paced, distracting world, it's hard to check in with that. We go, I'll get to that this afternoon, or I'll do that tomorrow. And 3 weeks have passed and we're like, oof, it's not working well for me at the moment, and I don't know why. Well, how about you? I do it for my business every have 12-month goals, and I review them at the end of the year. I have quarterly goals, monthly goals, weekly and daily tasks and intentions. And I always reflect on my day, how I felt energetically, how I feel I went with my business and things that I had to get done for the day. And, much like you, I have the 8 areas, you have the 6, how I feel I showed up in those areas. One thing I'd love to know, Michael, is how you know when you're being present. Because there are many people out there who may not be aware of what that should feel like, because we are so used to being distracted. We're either thinking about our past and not feeling good about it, or some people do feel good about it and we live in the hero days like I used to do for a long time, or we're so focused on planning the future that we just miss the now. Yeah. So how do you know when you're present, and what's that look like for you, or feel like for you? Sorry.
Just like anything, I mean, it takes practice. So there's, tons of research around mindfulness and meditation and what that looks like. And you don't have to, sometimes people make it really complicated. I love taking these things that are complicated and going like, what's the tiniest little thing that you could start doing right now? So, even if you just sit for 1 minute and you just count your breaths in and out, like, 1, 2, and you just count it in and out, you'll notice, maybe once you get to breath 6, then you start thinking about like, oh yeah, the new year and resolutions, and I'm going to do, what number was I on? Right? Like, wait, right. Then anytime for me, I just start over at 1. I'm like, okay, here we go. Back to 1, 2, 3. And you can do it for a minute. And it's just a very simple thing that you can do to start training it. And when you're in the area of meditation and you hear about it, what I loved, and I forget who said it might have been Tara Brach, but she said just that aspect of returning back to your breath, or the aspect of returning back to the numbers that you're counting, that makes it a successful session. So that's an interesting, because we define successful like, I failed at, quote unquote, meditating today.
Yeah.
Right. But just that aspect of like, regardless of whether, 58 seconds out of the 60, you were thinking about something else and then you returned back to it. Great. It's a success. So that's something that you can start to do. I'm a big fan of very tiny little habits. So we have this big gap. What I was talking about with success, those are like outcome goals, and they're phenomenal. But 80% of people's New Year's resolutions fail by February. Mm-hmm. And the reason is they don't convert outcome goals into behavioral goals. They don't go, what behaviors, habits, routines, whatever, actually get me to that outcome. And that is a huge piece that is missing in what people do.
I could not agree more with that. And what would be some of those habits that, when you're working with entrepreneurs, right, they're generally people who are trying to solve problems and obviously create opportunities for themselves in that process. And when you talk about behavioral habits, I couldn't agree more that a lot of people often overlook that, because, I'll use 6-week challenges and as an example. It's an outcome goal for a lot of people. They go in there with the mindset that in 6 weeks, I'm going to drop this much weight and do this. And they don't focus on what they're doing on a daily basis. Once they've finished their 6-week challenge, all of the commitment and consistency goes out the door, and they celebrate and go back to the same poor behaviors that they had in the lead up to that, which is why you often see some incredible results, or just people feel better, look better, and then they go back to how they were feeling or thinking previously. And I'm experiencing it in my own life now, as we spoke about on an earlier podcast, Michael, where I feel I've allowed myself to drink more and have a lot more social interactions this year. And I'm starting to feel the negative effects of those behavioral patterns, like drinking more alcohol, not sleeping as much, not prioritizing my self-care. And it's really starting to have an outcome. The outcomes aren't as good as I want in my life. So going back to, as I shared on yours, the behaviors that I need to start tidying up and recreating habits in my life. What are some of those, I guess, behavioral habits that you're aware of that can help people, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're an everyday bloke, to optimize your performance and your productivity?
Yeah. So I will talk about kind of the process first, and then I'll give you a couple ones that kind of help. So one of my favorite books on behavioral change period. It's Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. And he lays out just a phenomenal way to take these outcomes and break them down into behaviors. And so this is incredibly important. And this is actually what makes you successful, is making them so small and almost like so stupid easy that it takes motivation almost entirely out of the equation. So he talks about behavior. There's 3 components that go into any behavior. So for behavior to happen, you have to have motivation, you have to have the ability to do it, and you have to have some sort of prompt. So he says B equals MAP, basically motivation, ability, and prompt. When your motivation is high, you can do incredible things, and it's awesome to leverage that. Right. But then if we rely on motivation, it can kind of leave us high and dry. He has a just phenomenal quote. He's like, motivation is like, your party animal friend. He's like the friend that's fun to go out with, but it's not the friend you call to pick you up from the airport. Right. And we want the people that can pick us up from the airport. Right. That's like the day-to-day stuff. So he talks about you can cater to your ability, find out like what is making this behavior difficult to do. Right? Is it time? Is it money? Is it a physical effort thing? Is it a mental effort thing? Is there a routine that's already in place that's making it difficult to do? So what's making it difficult to do? And then you can break it down and make it easier. Like, how can I make this so small that it takes that motivation out of the equation, and I have the ability to be able to do it. I have the time, I have the money, I have the mental and physical, resources to be able to do it. And then the P stands for a prompt. So you have to, every behavior is actually cued by something. And you have to be aware of like, what is actually cueing this behavior? And so he talks about there's different prompts. We have environmental prompts. We have prompts internally. Like if I say, I need to go to the grocery store and get onions, that's an internal prompt. And they're not super great at us actually remembering what we need to do. Right. But then you have prompts that are actually anchored already into your day. So everybody, wakes up, everybody, potentially brushes their teeth and, eats breakfast or lunch or dinner or goes to the bathroom. You can use these things that are already baked into your routine to prompt a different behavior. So you make the habit so small and you just basically go, he uses the analogy, and I actually use this too, right? Like to actually floss, like I feel like it's like a mythical creature that people that actually floss every day, right? And I actually became one of those mythical creatures because he basically goes, you floss one tooth, right? Which sounds just ridiculous. You make it like another coach described it as like the flat tire sound, like right, right. That's ridiculous. Flossing one tooth, like. Right. But you floss one tooth. And I've actually found that just flossing one tooth, and I tie it in with the habit I already have of brushing my teeth. I have to floss one tooth. Let's say like I stayed up really late, it's 12:30. I don't want to, but I go, okay, I could just floss one tooth. I don't have to have motivation for that. Right. But then once you floss one tooth, you're like, whatever. Like, let me just do all of them. Right. And you can do that with workout shoes, like, putting your workout clothes on beforehand, putting your, shoes on, like, I'm just going to tie my workout shoes. Right. I'm not going to do a workout necessarily. I'm just going to tie my workout shoes. Well, I have them on. I have my workout clothes on. I'm just going to do one set at the gym. And it sounds silly, but it's actually crazy how big of a difference that makes. So some of the habits, and I know this aligns with what you're talking about. I mean, sleeping is really important. Making sure you get 8 hours of sleep, and you can, instead of just going like, oh, maybe you're getting 5.5, right? Instead of going 8, just go, how can I get 5 hours and 45 minutes of sleep? Right. And what does that look like for 2 weeks? What would I need to change? And then working your way. Exercise is important. And I like talking about it with these, because once you have these tiny little habits, you can actually move them around. So for a period of my life, I was waking up, 5 a.m. I get my workout in before my kids wake up, because you have this variable of the kids and they wake up and then it's all, it's just out the window. So I would get my workout in. I feel great. I get my shower, but I personally just really, really struggle to wake up in the morning. I love sleeping. Like I'm just a huge fan of sleeping. So I really struggle with that. So now I adjusted it where like, I don't necessarily get up before my kids, but I have maybe it's like a set of squats or some kettlebell swings, some rows, and a set of push-ups. And I can do that in 3 minutes while I'm actually working throughout the day. Maybe every hour I'll do a set of that. And so in my day, I might get 4 to 5 sets of a workout that I would do, but it's catered to where I need it to be. So then you have things like COVID that happen. Instead of my whole workout getting thrown off, I can just adjust and go, oh, now this actually works better in the afternoon. I can put this in the afternoon, or I can put, my little bit of meditation, I can move it around, or I can put a little bit of, Tai Chi or whatever it is. I can actually move it around. So you have this, it's similar to the idea of like a lean startup or an agile company that it can shift based on what is actually the incomes and outcomes that are going on. So long answer to your question, but there you go.
I loved that. I took away so much from that. You really have a great way of sharing your processes around how we can all, better off improve from that. I really enjoy as well, like even from that workout example you gave there, like taking ownership. When things like COVID pop up, life is going to be full of things that are out of our control. And a lot of us there are many people, out there who tend to focus on that being the reason why they can't achieve something, why they can't get the results or the outcome that they're looking for, rather than that ownership that you just sort of shared there, where you just said, okay, well, this is how I'm going to best optimize this into my life now with what COVID's thrown at me. I'm going to move my workouts to the afternoon, or I'm going to do it in and around certain other habits in my life. And I think I was sharing with you earlier, I do the same with podcasts. I love jumping in the car and just cranking some tunes and just fully switching off. But I'm like, it's a great opportunity for me to learn or listen or doing something like that from an audio book or a podcast. So I just say, right, just 10 minutes. The first 10 minutes of every trip is a podcast or an audio book, and I'll find myself the whole trip listening, because once you start, you're in momentum. You've created that actionable step, and that's why sometimes the hardest part is to just start. And I think whatever's holding you back, or whatever you're fearing, or whatever that limiting belief may be, sometimes literally action overcomes all of the negative thoughts and processes, and you can look back at yourself and go, I can't believe I did that. That is possible, to go on a whole car trip listening to a podcast and not needing music, or I can actually go to the gym and build that around my life, which is very, very exciting. So I think the ownership was what I took away a lot from those processes as well. So thanks for sharing that.
And one thing on that, an interesting exercise to do is, because we can focus on the things that are outside of our control. So I like having my clients, you make concentric circles. So inside the middle concentric circle is like the things that you can control. Then the next circle is like the things you can sort of control, and then the outside is stuff that you can't control. And just actually think about your life. Like, what can you control? I can't control the lockdowns. I can't control COVID. I can't control, my business shutting down, losing my job. I just can't control those things. And there's things that some can control, and we realize this is smaller than we thought before COVID, right? Some things like my routine, I thought I could control that, but I kind of can. I can kind of control that. I can kind of control, interactions and stuff with other people. And then there's the things at the very center that you can absolutely control. And that has to do with like your responses to stuff, your reactions to things. And you could say this could be maybe in the kind of control, but if you make the habit small enough, there's things that you can do that pretty much you can absolutely control. And whether that's grounding exercises, whether it's things like, some people talk about like making your bed in the morning, right? You can just, I make my bed in the morning. It's like I can get a little win in. So that exercise can be helpful, just to go, okay, these are the things that I can actually control. How about I spend 80% of my time trying to focus on this and letting go of the other stuff that I can't really.
Definitely. That's a great point to share. And even backing it up with the intention behind why you're doing things, like going for those quick wins in the morning. If you have that habit where you do make the bed first thing in the morning, I don't, purely because I get up at 4 a.m. and my missus gets up at 7 a.m. So she makes the bed. But the intention behind, okay, well, why am I going to be making the bed this morning? It's one, I like going to the bedroom in the afternoon or in the evening to a nice made bed. It makes me feel good coming back to a clean space, but it's also that, like you said, that quick win. So thinking about other moments throughout your day, what's the intention behind why you're doing what you're doing? As I mentioned earlier, we live in a very, very, and entrepreneurs especially, Michael, we make ourselves very busy. We commit to a lot of stuff, and sometimes it can be overwhelming. So going through your day and going, okay, well, what's the intention behind doing this? And could that time be better served elsewhere? I went through a period 2 weeks ago where I had a lot of, I just said yes to a lot of coffees and stuff like that. And there was no real intention behind it. It wasn't for like a consult or anything. I was just like, yeah, I'll catch up. And then I was like, well, I haven't spent much time with my wife lately. I should could better spend that time elsewhere. So when I actually reviewed my week, the upcoming week, I was like, going to have to cancel a few of those meetings because my intention is at the moment I want to spend time with my wife, and there's no real intention to those commitments that I've made there. So I think once again that the value and the beauty in being prepared and also reviewing where your time's going and setting intent can help you minimize overwhelm throughout the week and get better results. So spending more time on the things that are going to bring you back some great results with the outcomes that you're looking for from your life. But Michael, I've got one last question for you, and then I'd love to also hear where everyone can find you if they want to listen to your podcast or look at the coaching work that you do. But what's your definition of being a man?
It's a great question, and I'd have to think about it for, deeper. It's something that I'm like, I want to think about this. Some of it has to do with the definition that I just have around success. So I feel like being present with my family, with my kids, but also with my emotions, like being somebody that's integrated as a whole person. So I know what I want. I believe I have the confidence that I can learn it, connect with the people that I need to create it. But then I'm also like an acceptance of myself. This is something that's challenging for me personally too. So when you talk about that issue of enoughness, like it's a challenge for me. Like what is enough? And that's at the heart of that question, like being a man, what is enough? Like as a man. And so wrestling with that question, and what would that actually feel like? And also, is this moment enough? Accepting like the moment, everything for what it is, right? So we love the pleasurable moments, but also accepting like the pain and just going like, this moment is enough. And I am enough in this moment too. Like when I get frustrated with my kids and I'm like, shoot, like I should be doing better than this. I know better than this, but going, okay, I was aware of it. I accept it. Like it's enough. And like, let's try to do better next time. So at a very deep level, it would be being enough and being integrated with all the parts of myself as a man.
That's an incredible answer. And for those who love the idea of what Michael was saying there, but knowing that it integrates with various areas of your life, but you aren't quite sure what those areas could be, or haven't, I guess, set intention, or as we were talking about earlier, sat down and said, what does it feel like to be successful in this area of your life? You could probably take some time after listening to this episode and get a notepad out and, scroll back 30 minutes and write a few of those questions down and just replicate those questions in different areas of your life so you can start building that awareness. Because when you ask yourself questions, you can deliver some answers, and then you can ask more questions on that and get to a point where you feel comfortable and it feels right for you. If not, ask more questions, or you can even jump on Google and ask Google some questions to help point you in the right direction. Or you can come see either Michael or myself. But Michael, where can people find you if they want to get in contact with you? Obviously, you have the podcast and you have coaching.
Yeah. So to go along with what you said, I'll save them a little bit of time. I actually have like the ebook that I have on my website. Perfect. Is kind of like your success engineering ebook. I have all of those questions broken down, and then space for you to fill it out, to like really think about what is success and to define it. So they can check that out. Successengineering.org. The podcast is on there as well. So Success Engineering Podcast is on all the major platforms.
Awesome. Keeps it nice and simple. So I'll have that in the show notes for those who just want to scroll down and click on it. But thank you so much for your time, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I just want to acknowledge you for all the work that you're doing. I feel always energized and inspired after getting off conversations like this. You get me to think differently, and also just learning how your processes and how you view life is, for me. Once again, thanks for taking the time to listen to the episode. If you got value from it, share it on your socials, tag myself at Lachlan Stuart, and I will be sure to repost it on the socials. Until next week, have a great week. Thank you for listening to the Man That Can Project podcast. My name is Lachie Stuart, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful. If you did, please take a moment to rate and review the Man That Can Project on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with our newest episodes. We'll see you again next time.